Hi all, this is Erica, aka ECR Horses 1901, back for the 4th edition of tier ranking every traditional sized Breyer horse mold. Let's go ahead and jump right in. First up is Fury Prancer, introduced in 1955, sculpted by Chris Hess. We go from ending the last video with a very recent mold to what I believe is the oldest that we have seen so far. I don't feel like it's fair to judge this guy on realism or anything like that. He's just kind of a fun piece of Breyer history. This is one of those molds I secretly hope to find in good condition somewhere, especially one of the lamps or clocks whenever I go to antique stores, but it hasn't happened yet. Anyway, for this horse, B tier. Galiseno, introduced in 1978, sculpted by Chris Hess. Well, back to another horse mold, kinda like Bolia from a while back. There's just nothing very exciting here. I guess it's worth noting that this is the mold they chose for Sergeant Reckless, a pony-sized mare who was used during the Korean War and was given a bunch of awards for her service. Surprisingly, this has been used as a one-of-one Breyerfest live auction model 4 times, although not since 2006, and I couldn't actually find a selling price at least for that particular year's model. This mold also continues to be used as part of a set, the quote-unquote gangsters, Tony DePony and Bugsy Maloney, he's the one on the left, and I have been talking for way too long about a mold that is ultimately going to be F tier. Gaming Stock Horse, aka Wyatt. Introduced in 2014, sculpted by Morgan Kilborn. This mold isn't my absolute favorite, I'll get that out of the way immediately, but it has grown on me since I first started seeing it. I actually got picked to purchase one of the Yellowstone models, which is neat, part of Breyer's limited edition Wild Animals series. And speaking generally, for whatever reason, this is one of the rare molds I think looks better matte, not glossy. Like, for example, with Fletcher, who I just think looks better here. I don't think I'll be going out of my way to get any more of these, but he's not bad by any means. B tier. Gem Twist, introduced in 1993, sculpted by Kathleen Moody. This is another mold where I'm going to admit straight up that I am biased. I adored Gem Twist, the real-life horse, when I was a kid, and I got this model as soon as I could. He's still in decent condition, and I recently won first place in a contemporary regular run 1990s class at a regional show with him, so yes, I am biased. Now, is he the best thoroughbred model? No, definitely not, and I probably won't be adding more of these to my collection, although this fox hunting set from 2001 through 2003 is pretty fun. That said, if any of the 10 people who have a Desi from 2017 Breyerfest want to give him up, please give me a call. B tier. I'll admit I have heard this mold's name pronounced multiple ways, and I'm not sure which one is correct, so I am just going to go with the easiest pronunciation, which is George, aka Rhenish German Draft, introduced in 2019, sculpted by Brigitte Eberl. This guy was created as a Premier Club model and has been turned into quite a few different models despite only being a few years old. I know I said before that drafts aren't really my thing, but there are some nice looking horses here. I've seen this glossy Rhenish Draft in person and really dug him, so who knows. C tier. German Riding Pony, aka Nicholas, introduced in 2022, sculpted by Brigitte Eberl. Okay, newest mold. I've only seen the Nicholas model in person, and while there's nothing wrong with him and it's a nice looking mold, I don't find him very inspiring. I actually much prefer the Gabriel models, which were 2022 web specials that came in a variety of glossy metallic colors, as well as Cole, who, despite this picture being a little bit blurry, you can see is a nice glossy black. It'll be interesting to see what models are made on this mold in the future, but for now, C tier. Geronimo, introduced in 2016, sculpted by Mooing Piglet Studios. Believe it or not, I am not about to say this is just another generic horse mold. I actually quite like him and the variety of stock horses that he can be. Geronimo was originally part of the 2016 Premiere Collection as this really nice Grillo painted horse, and has since appeared in many different colors and patterns. Most of the models on this mold have been nice. In fact, it would be easier for me to list the ones I haven't been fond of, but I am not going to do that. All I'll say is, if anyone has an extra Ambrose laying around, I will gladly take him off your hands. A tier. Jilin, introduced in 2009, sculpted by Brigitte Eberl. This foal is another mold created for the Just About Horses Connoisseur series. He has usually appeared as the foal in a variety of mare and foal sets, such as Gigi Valentine and Heartbreaker, and Cloud's Encore and Tour. For a foal mold, he's a good one. He doesn't have any of the dopey or awkwardly shaped heads we've seen in other foals. Well, for the most part. This is actually a bit more cursed than dopey, but anyway, overall, the word that I would use to describe this mold, other than perhaps this particular model, is refined. Good stuff. A tier. Giselle, introduced in 2008, sculpted by Brigitte Eberl. Sorry about the tiny pic, it was either this or a normal size, but weirdly yellow tinted one. Anyway, I enjoy this mold. She really looks like a mare with a very kind eye and face. Of all the colors this mold has appeared with, I think my favorite is probably the glossy silver black Slate Surprise, which was a Breyer Fest 2020 special run. Something about the gloss with this color combination really makes the model pop. This is a good example of a mold with some versatility without falling into the generic horse trap. A tier. Goffert, introduced in 2005, sculpted by Kathleen Moody. I just don't know about this one. This is objectively a better Frisian mold than the older one we've looked at, but for some reason I am not into it. If anything, I find myself drawn to the deco colors and patterns instead, like Nightmare, the 2014 Halloween horse that was at brick and mortar stores only, and the Breyer Fest 1 live auction models from 2019 and 2021, respectively. Another mold that falls into the not terrible, just not for me camp. C tier. Grazing Foal, introduced in 1964, sculpted by Chris Hess. This foal mold is a bit goofy. Seems as though, again, most of the foal molds are, but it's cute. The glossy buckskin blanket Appaloosa from the 2018 Vintage Club pair, Clara and May, is very sweet. This gets a C tier, but it's like a C+. Grazing Mare, introduced in 1961, sculpted by Chris Hess. So what's interesting about the Grazing Mare is that when she's part of a set, it's not always with the grazing foal that we have just seen. Sometimes yes, but over the years she's been paired with a few other foal molds, such as the Lying Down foal in 1995 for JCPenney's holiday catalog, and even with Sea Star, who I can't wait to talk about Sea Star, but that's not going to be for a little while. But anyway, they were paired together for a 1998 through 1999 regular run. As for the Grazing Mare herself, this mold is another one that's probably not going to win you ribbons in modern breed classes, but could be fun just to collect. Fun fact, I like her much better from the near side than the far side. It's something about the longish mane, especially how it falls on her face. I just don't care for it. Grazing Mare, C tier. Gypsy Vanner, aka Brishan, introduced in 2012, sculpted by Kathleen Moody. This is another mold like the Arabian Mare in the first video that actually has a few different leg and tail positions. It's also been used as a Lusitano in 2018 and an Andalusian in 2014, aside from being a Gypsy Vanner. This isn't one of my favorite molds, but there are some interesting models, such as the buckskin Gypsy Vanner Samson, who was a Tractor Supply horse from 2019, and Thriller, who was a fun 2021 Halloween horse. Yet another C tier. Haflinger, introduced in 1979, sculpted by Chris Hess. Poor, unfortunate Haflinger, if you can honestly even call him one. There's a lot wrong with this little guy, and I'm frankly surprised they've continued to use this mold as recently as 2019 as both the Pony for Christmas web special and as the Breyer Fest Diorama contest prize that same year. Like, I'm sorry, but putting a nice chestnut gloss on him doesn't make him better. F tier. Hala, introduced in 1977, sculpted by Chris Hess. I've said my piece on this mold back when we covered Bolia in the first video. Go watch that instead. F tier. Hanoverian, introduced in 1980, sculpted by Chris Hess. This was another childhood favorite of mine, specifically the Gifted model, a commemorative edition from 1994. He's another that's definitely not great by today's standards and is probably not going to place well if you were to show him against newer Warm Blood models, but I like to think he does still have some eye appeal. This mold has been used pretty consistently since it was introduced, most recently in 2021, when the Stunalino version named Stubbs was the Breyer Fest Diorama contest prize. Certainly better than the glossy Haflinger. B tier. Huckleberry Bay, introduced in 1999, sculpted by Kathleen Moody. This is a nice mold, although I usually find myself thinking he's meant to be a saddlebred, not an Arabian, but I believe he's been used exclusively as an Arabian, or at least a part Arabian model, this whole time. I do know I plan on adding Napoleon's Marengo from 2003 to my historical horses collection, and I would not pass up Technicolor, the color-changing filigree deco special run from Breyer Fest 2010. I'll be generous, let's go A tier. Icelandic, introduced in 2014, sculpted by Kathleen Moody. Is it weird that I like Icelandic horses, and I don't mind this mold, but none of the existing models currently grab me? I'm going to go with C tier just because I'm curious to see what they do with this mold in the future. Ideal American Quarter Horse, aka AQHA, Quarter Horse. Introduced in 1995, sculpted by Susan Fiedler. So this is another mold that's a bit funky by today's standards. I'm actually surprised I didn't get one of these back in the day because quarter horses have always been one of my favorite breeds, especially when I was growing up, but I barely remember this guy being around. Probably the most interesting thing about this mold is that almost every model that has been made using it has been a limited edition, except maybe the QVC models, one of which you see here named King, back in 2002. It honestly isn't clear. Even still, we're falling into generic horse category here, and I don't see a single one that I would spring for. F tier. And that brings us to the final mold for this video, and that is the In-Between Mare, introduced in 1959 or 1960, sculpted by Chris Hess, ? Apparently, there was a gap in time between the Proud Arabian Mare's existence and the creation of the Family Arabian Mare, and this mold that you see was used during that interim, hence the name In-Between Mare. She's really only different from those other mares in slight ways, and there have not been many models made with this exact mold. In 2020, the Vintage Collectors Club did offer 3 different colors of this, with a model called Zara. Pictured here is the rose gray Pinto, but there were also a Blood Bay and Palomino versions. But perhaps the most striking model on this mold of all time was this bright, glossy, metallic blue version, which, along with a similarly colored Proud Arabian foal, was a one-of-one Breyer Fest live auction set from 2022, which sold for $23,000. We're going back to C tier for this one. And since that's our last horse for this video, it's time to take a glance at our tier rankings. So there were actually no additions to S tier today, so we are still at 6 horses there. A tier now has 14, we have 12 in B tier, 24 in C tier, D tier also had no changes, so still at 9 horses there, and we have almost as many, 8 in F tier. So that is all for this 4th video. Please like, subscribe, comment, all those YouTube related things that people have been really good at doing so far. Thank you. And I will see you next week for our 5th edition.